Yes, love's a secret weapon. Yeah!
Hi, I'm Donna Loren.
And I'm Dr. Adam Gerace.
And you are listening to Love's a Secret Weapon podcast. Welcome to our episode of Love's a Secret Weapon with my darling Dr. Adam and our guest, Walter Egan.
Hello.
Say that Walter and I had an opportunity to meet, oh gosh, probably 15 or more years ago.
It was at the Rock Con, right?
And there was a Dick Dale show in Malibu that you were doing with a fellow named Johnny Z.
Right, in the Malibus, which is one of the bands I play in.
And so you opened and included a couple songs from the Beach Party movies that I did with Dick to open that. Yeah,
that was so fun. That was such a cool thing.
It really was.
Muscle Bustle, the Hustle Bustle.
That's right. That's right. It was actually a Brian Wilson song. Wow. And yeah, it was
cool.
Good to see Dick before he left us.
Yes, he rode the last wave.
And so that's when we met. And I just recall, I don't know if you recall this, but Jared and I had just moved back from Hawaii and moved into, Beverly Glen Canyon. Yep. And it was mid-September. And all of a sudden, the temperature went to 113. And I remember you and Johnny came to the house, and we were all like,
Yeah. Well, I think we met at that little restaurant at the top of Beverly Glen also.
That's right.
I remember that being part of it. Because not when I first arrived in LA, but Beverly Glen played a big part in my life there. I moved
tell me how. Why?
Well, 943 North Beverly Glen is where I lived from 76, maybe 75, 76 until, I was there over until the late 80s, I think it was. It was after my son was born. That was when we had moved. Anyway, yeah, I love Beverly Glen.
I do too.
It's a wonderful place. And
I know Adam knows Beverly Glen too, because that's where we were living when Adam came in 2011.
Absolutely, it was. So I became quite familiar with it. And it's interesting, Donna, that you've started you were talking about beach songs and surf songs. Because Walter, your beginnings were surf music, even though you were in New York, and I think that's really interesting because a New York boy takes such an interest in surf music. So would you tell us a little bit about that and that beginning? And you mentioned the Malibus as well.
Well, of course. I think part of it is the proximity and the distance from California and the dream of California that grew in me from the movies and from the music and so I got my first guitar when I was 15, and that would have been the summer of '63. And when I went back to school, I was going to school with John Zambetti, Johnny Z, the aforementioned. And I had been learning from a Kingston Trio songbook. They had the pictures of the chords, and I was a big Kingston Trio fan, and I had been listening very intently to the Kingston Trio for a number of years. So that's basically how I taught myself. And I would, maybe the Steve Allen show, Steve Allen had a show every night at 11, and he would have like Peter, Paul, and Mary on as a guest. And when they would come on, I would look at the hands of the guitar players trying to go, oh, okay, I see. And so, yeah, it was one of these weird things because I never wanted to take lessons as such. When the moment of epiphany for me with music and being a musician happened that summer. I had been on vacation with my parents in Nantucket, the island up off Massachusetts. And I didn't really want to just hang out with them all day. And there happened to be a piano in this in this cottage where we were staying. So they would go out and do their walks, and I would sit in the cottage and I would kind of try to pick out melodies on the keyboard and just,
Mm.
you know. And so my parents came in as I was doing that, and I think I was a big fan of West Side Story at the time, so I think I might have been trying to do Maria or something, one of those songs that had such a strong melody.
Mm.
And they were like, "Oh, you have talent. Oh, we'll get you a
Oh,
piano. We'll get you."
oh,
It was like, "No, no, I don't want a piano. I want a guitar." And because my cousin, I'm an only child, but I have a twin cousin. We were born 15 minutes apart in the
Mm.
oh,
same hospital,
oh,
delivered by the same doctor. So we
oh,
grew up as brothers in Queens, New York,
oh, wow.
and he got a banjo shortly before this time. So, it had been in the air about,
Mm.
let's get an instrument that. And so I had been thinking about guitar and Kingston Trio, etc. And so, yeah, that was the beginning. And so I went back to school, told John, yeah, yeah, I got a guitar, and John was doodling a picture of his Gretsch electric guitar and an amplifier, and he was going, I'm going to start a band. If you get an electric guitar, you can be in the band. And so I thought this is a good idea, and so I convinced my parents to buy me a brand new Fender Stratocaster and
Mm.
Ooh.
amp.
Do
I
you
wish I
still
still
have it?
No, I wish I still had it.
Oh,
I traded it at some point for, I think, well, I traded it for a Rickenbacker 12 string at some
Mm.
point in the later 60s, and then I traded that guitar for a VW van. So, in those days, there was a dynamic thing going on. But anyway, but John was starting a band called the Malibus,
Mm.
and the Malibus, it was like, wait, the Beach Boys, yeah, yeah. So it was this. I think the further away you get from California, maybe,
Mm.
the more mythical it becomes, and it had become that for us. And he
Mm.
and I would get together. We became best friends, and we would listen to Beach Boy records and go, "Do you hear the bass and the piano are playing the same thing?" And
Mhm.
so this was how I cut my teeth. And of
Mm.
course, in those days, the band was more instrumental, so we did a lot of ventures as
Mm.
well in those days. So I think that's where my love of the Beach Boys grew out of at that point.
Mm.
And then we began writing songs shortly thereafter, and it was great because we were a self-contained, appreciative audience for one another. He would write a song, and I'd go, "Oh man, I think I can do that." My first song was inspired, so to speak, by hearing "Leader of the Pack," which is Shangri-La's song, and it was
Mm.
only in a kind of backwards kind of inspiration. It was like, I could write something like this, I think. I was blossoming as a poet of some sort in those days. I had an English teacher in high school who was very encouraging for me.
Mm.
I became the editor of the literary magazine at Loyola School where we went, and so, you know, it was all kind of coalescing at that point. And
Mm.
but I was 16 when I started writing songs, and I really
Mm.
haven't stopped. So it's a
Amen.
And
it's a lifelong
it,
devotion that is.
sure, it's a passion, of course.
Well, it is, and I think you attune yourself to noticing songs in the world, whether it's something someone says as a phrase or turns a funny phrase, or
Mm.
melodies come more so by sitting there with a guitar and kind of exploring in the dark. I used to go to
Mm.
bed with my guitar.
Mhm.
And
Well,
I
Donna,
think it's,
you,
it's also a good thing because you can play
yeah.
if you can play in the dark, somehow you're
Ooh.
connected to your instrument more so. So
Mm.
yeah, but I never really knew music theory
Mm.
until way later when people would explain to me the reason why those chords work. I mean, for example, Magnet and Steel for that matter. I
Mm.
just wrote that because I thought the chords sounded good together. And when I brought it to the band, they said, "Well, what key? It's in the key of E, but you never go to the E." So it's like, okay, I don't think I could have thought of that without it. It's just a
Intuitive.
self-discovery.
Well,
Yeah.
that
So,
would be a good introduction. May we hear Magnet and Steel a bit?
well,
We,
I think yes.
yes, I will cue that up for us.
Yeah.
always great to hear it again.
And what an experience! You shared with me that Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham were involved
Yes.
in that project.
Hmm. Well, yeah, they were the producers of my first album
Mm,
on Columbia, Fundamental Role, which came out in 1977.
mm,
And it was during the recording of that. Well, I mean, you know, just I didn't really know who they were before. I had this small deal offered to
mm.
me, and they said, "How about Buckingham Nicks for your producer?" I was like, "Is that a guy? Who is that?" So I, found out who they were, and I felt a real simpatico with a lot of what they were doing. I had been working in a band called Sageworth, which
Mm,
had a woman named Annie McClune who was the lead singer,
mm.
and and my middle name being Lindsay, and there was Lindsay, and then Stevie and Annie's birthdays were like a couple of weeks apart. It was like,
Kismet.
the gods were aligning
Mm,
for me. Anyway, so during that first album, Stevie was doing the background vocals on a song of mine called Tunnel of Love, Tunnel O' Love, which, is my most ribald song, I suppose. But it was late at night, and she did the crazy wailing background vocals on it that people can hear if they go to the
uh-oh,
record. Anyway,
what's happened to you?
that night I was inspired to finish a song which I had been working on, which had the stroll beat. And only old people remember the stroll, I guess, but
Oh,
I,
but it's classic. I love that.
I put the old in old school. And so, and yeah, then the lyrics came together rather quickly after my
Mm,
inspiration from her that night. And so, well, the complications of all those times, Lindsay and Stevie were going through this head-to-head battle of, the breakup and the work
mm,
together, but they were trying to keep Buckingham Nicks as a brand alive by working with me.
mm,
But when the second
Mm.
album came along, it was really Lindsay, and Stevie backed off, and she just helped on vocals on some of the tracks, some
Mm.
of the arrangements, I guess. But so she came in and sang on it, and she knew. I mean, you're a woman who's lost to her song. I mean, it's fairly obvious, at least if you
mm,
know my situation at the time.
Mm.
And it. I still remain friends with Lindsay, even though I did
mm.
have that crush on his,
Oh.
estranged girlfriend during these periods, and so, you know, it is a little weird, I guess, but it, I mean, I had a brief moment of kind of dating Stevie at the end of 1976, and
Mm.
that was while we were making that album, and it just
Mm.
was awkward to be in the studio with the two of them, and anyway. So she became this muse for me, I suppose, during
Mm.
those years, and you know,
Mm.
unrequited love is a good topic for a song, anyway. I feel.
Oh boy.
But I think
Unrequited.
the version that we did when we re-recorded
Mm.
it, Donna, was really nice. I think that sounds really good, and I hope people get to hear that.
Yeah, I think what I'll save that for a bit later
Okay,
because
yeah.
there's a lot of music that you've made that I'd love to share as well. And
Oh,
Mm.
Adam was saying that um, he did a little research about Eminem doing a song and sampling some of your Hot Summer Nights.
well, yeah, that was out
Mm.
of left field, but so Hot Summer Nights was the big follow-up, meant to be anyway,
Yes.
to Magnet and Steel. Magnet
Mm.
and Steel came out in the middle, around this time of year in 1978,
Mm.
and it took a gradual climb up the charts, and Columbia believed in it. It lost the bullet a couple of times, and they believed in it, and
Mm.
whatever the magic of the record business is, and it just kept going, and it got to number 8,
Mm.
um, ultimately. But it took a while to get there, and it didn't really peak until probably the first week in September, maybe.
Mm.
But during the summer, those smaller stations that had gone on Magnet early were going deep tracks, and they were playing Hot Summer
Yeah.
Nights, and it just seemed we kept, trying to get them to release Hot Summer Nights as a single in the middle of the summer, so it would make sense.
Yeah.
But of course, Columbia didn't. And even in September, when my record was the highest charting record on the label, on CBS, all labels, Walter Yetnikoff, who was the president of the label, the big label at that point, advised me that not to worry, that it took Billy Joel 4 albums, and it took Boz Scaggs 4 albums, and at the quote was, at CBS we break artists, and to me that word has a double meaning, and I was like, you're breaking me right now. It's like, come on. But anyway, by the time they did release it, it sort of stalled out mid-chart around in the 50s, I think, in the toward the end of that year. But it was picked up by Richard Perry, famous producer, and he was starting a label called Planet Records, and they had a kind of a Fleetwood Mac-ish band called Night, and I think their lead singer was even named Stevie. So it was a funny kind of, okay, if you don't get it, her name is Stevie.
We'll hit you over the head with it.
So, and they had a pretty good hit with it. It was, top 10 in some parts of the world and top 20 for most of the world. The group Night and Hot Summer Nights. They did it in G minor. I do it in D minor. I think we did it in D minor when we did it, Donna. And in the spring of that year, they re-recorded Hot Summer Nights, and it became a hit. And it was funny because I met Jon Stewart, not the comedian, but the Kingston Trio man, at the Musicians Union one day in '78. And he came up to me and introduced himself, and I go, "Oh, of course I know you. I learned the guitar from Kingston Trio books." And he was like, "I love your record, man. I love that song Hot Summer Nights, and tell me who's your drummer, and can you introduce me to Lindsay?" So I was like, "Oh, sure, of course, yeah." So I did all those things. I told him, and I introduced him, and then he put out that song Gold, which was concurrent with Hot Summer Nights.
Yes.
And there's a real kinship between those two tracks, if you ask me. So, I mean, even to the extent that, I was in a taxi cab in New York City one day, and he had the radio on, and what I thought was the beginning of Hot Summer Nights came on, and I went, "Hey, man, put that up. I wrote that song." And he's like, "Oh, he turns, oh, yeah, great." And when the lights go down in California, I was like, "Oh," But that karma got paid back, oddly enough, from that same song.
Yeah.
When Eminem, who probably could have slipped it by me without me knowing that, it's actually called an interpolation. The use that they did, because I expected it to be a needle drop of the which it wasn't, or the ooh part, which I think is also the hookish part of the chorus. It was really the chord progression and the feel, and they did it in. So Eminem used the key of G minor. So to me, that gave it away as this was from the Night version that this came. And yeah, it got to be a top 10 song for him. It was his comeback single. I had to approve it. They had to play it for me over the phone because they were afraid if they gave me an MP3, I would release it to the world. It was 2009. So yeah, it was kind of a nice shot in the arm, as it were.
Well, let's spin some Hot Summer Nights.
We'll do Hot Summer Night. I don't have Eminem's "We Made You," but
That's
anyone
all
that
right.
wants to check that one out, but
It's
we'll
all right.
play the
We're
original.
focusing on Walter.
Absolutely.
Hot summer night,
It's Lindsay, by the way.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
so
That
I'm
is
telling you,
summer in a song.
Well, it's a
that
funny
should,
thing.
that should be programmed every summer.
I think
Hmm.
so too. I'm plugging it away, as much as possible. The funny thing about that song is I was going to record after my first album. During the recording of that, Stevie sat down one day and played a song for me, and she said, "What do you think of this song?" And I was like, "Oh, it's great, yeah." But Fleetwood Mac doesn't want to do it, and I was like, "Well, show it to me, I'll do it,"
Yeah.
which I did. I taught it to my band, and during that tour of '77, we played it. We played it as an encore. Sometimes we play it as the end song. It was a song of hers called "Sisters of the Moon." And
Mm.
my version was Sister of the Moon, of course, turning it into a personal thing with her. And then when it came to record Not Shy album, which was August of '77, where we got in the studio for that, we were running it down in the big room at Sound City, and Lindsay came out and he was like, "What's this?" I was like, "Well, you guys didn't want to do it, and I know it's Stevie's song, but
Yeah.
I like it, and I think it'd be good. It goes over well." He's going, "Yeah, I know, but why don't you just go home and write a song to close the album with?" I was like, "Oh, sure, no problem." In those days, of course, with the two-sided albums, the end of the second side, you always wanted to be the big
Mm.
grabber that people would, the anthem-esque song. So it was summer, it was hot in LA, in Beverly Glen, driving down. I wrote that song in Beverly Glen as I was driving home from Van Nuys.
Mm.
And I thought that, well, the summertime was always great in high school and college too, when you'd have more time to play music and not have to worry about your studies and things. And so I
Absolutely.
it kind of began thinking about how great it was to be in a band and have friends and it was the camaraderie of having a band. It's almost a family when you have a really good band thing going. And it's tough, it's tough to do that. But anyway, so this was a celebration of being in bands that basically, and so I mean it had a certain nostalgic feel to it that people I think relate to,
Mm.
but the lyrics were very personal. So for me, the fact that, well, first the cover from Night was great, and then it was covered by a guy in France named Dick Rivers, and he did his version called Van de Levla, which translates as, I think, 22 skidoo or something like that. It's like an idiom. Then there was a Swedish version by a woman named Anne Greta, Flat Summer Dog, I think is the way that she.
Good, good.
And then there was a German version by a group called Wooden Nickel, which I still haven't been able to find on
Oh,
internet.
wow.
There was a Japanese version by a
Whoa.
group called Bluesy, and or that might have been the name of the album. Again, I haven't found those two anywhere as my search goes on for that. If
And is
anyone out
that,
there in
mm,
podcast land knows about those albums.
So
if anyone
Walter,
can find it,
So
mm,
when
yeah,
you
and of
when you
course,
were
just to finish that, and
yeah.
then the Malibus did a version of it on our debut album in 1981, Malibu's Rule, and I rewrote the lyrics more specifically to that band when we did that. So it's funny how a song, I guess when Lindsay says go home and write a song, you probably should listen to what he said and take it to heart. At the
And when
time, I
you
was
were
a little
when you
miffed.
were touring, like were you touring outside the country with your music?
We went to Britain and Germany and Holland in '79, but not that much because, my manager, Greg Lewick at the time, we made the deal. Well, once we got Lindsay and Stevie as producers,
mm,
suddenly Columbia Records was interested in this. I had originally had a deal from United Artists in England, just to do 6 tracks, six, songs. And so we recorded those 6 songs with Lindsay and Stevie. And when people heard what came of that, then a lot of interest was generated. And a guy named
yeah,
David Krebs, who was a partner in my management, he managed Aerosmith in those days. He had a good connection with Columbia, and they offered me a 6 album deal from
wow.
those 6 tracks. So once we had that, but we made the deal for North America with Columbia,
Mm.
and then dealt with territories individually around the world. So
Hmm.
there was no real concerted out of USA
Mm.
I
promotion,
see.
so
Hmm.
to speak, or whatever reason. But for whatever reason, it never really was big
Yeah.
anywhere else. I think Australia was probably as big as anywhere with Magnet
Yes.
Steel. But
Magnet of
other
Steel
than that,
was definitely a big hit here.
yeah.
And just on that, when you're talking about that, Walter, that idea that you have this big song, this big hit, and then you have this other song which should be a hit but perhaps doesn't happen. Does the fact that that's become both of those songs have become a classic, other people have covered them, people have sampled them. Does that in some ways kind of the long road sort of make up for perhaps that disappointment at that time, or
Oh well, yeah, it does. I mean, I don't have any gripes. Well, I
no
just
more than everyone else?
okay. I've just written a 500-page book about my life, and I'm calling it
Mm,
Magnitude, spelling with an E and magnet.
great.
But of course, gotta
Yeah.
go for the cheap shot. But yeah, and I mean, I feel lucky to have gotten what I've gotten out of the career because I mean, there was a point in 1978 where I did a 2-week tour with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Mm,
And one night I would open for him, and the next night he would open for me. It was at this
Mm.
kind of crossroads where my 45 was doing great. My album wasn't selling as much as it should
mm,
have. His albums were selling, but he wasn't selling 45s at that point. So it was this kind of
mm.
crossing of the paths. And you know, I feel like I should have had the success that he did, or at least some degree of it.
Mm.
And so there is an element of that, but I don't like to dwell on that.
Mhm.
I've continued to write songs and to make recordings. I've actually had 15 solo albums at this point.
Mm.
And then there's the albums with the Malibus and other bands like Brooklyn Cowboys, Burrito Deluxe, and a woman named Beth Sass, who I co-wrote some stuff with not too long ago. So yeah, I mean,
Mm.
yeah, I do feel content that it has been noticed enough. It would be
Yeah,
nice if someone else would pick up on it one more time here, and that's the songwriter's dream.
absolutely.
It's like, well, you've written 2,000 songs. Why do you want to write another song? That's like, well, I feel like saying something, maybe, but until something is written, who knows? And
Mm.
once it is written, you never know. And that's what I mean about the Hot Summer Nights being so personal at the
Mm.
time. I thought, well, yeah, okay, it's good. And then, anyway,
People connect,
it's,
and
I don't think you get anything out of being too sour grapesy about things.
And you said that you're taking off for Philadelphia tomorrow?
I am. We're doing a show for Georgetown. I went to Georgetown University, and
mm.
they have an organization called GEMA, which is the Georgetown Entertainment Media Alliance,
Mm.
and put on shows. A, a friend of mine who was a year ahead of me at Georgetown was Bill Danoff. Now, Bill Danoff has written a couple of classics. He's written Take Me Home Country Roads, which
Absolutely.
John Denver wrote maybe one line of that, and Bill had written the rest of it. And he also wrote Afternoon Delight, and
Oh, I
Starland
didn't
Vocal
know
Band
that.
was his band. So,
Of course, yes.
so, so Bill and I are kind of the big brothers of GEMA at
Mm.
this point. So I
Oh.
get to go and do a show there in Philadelphia at the Living Theater, I think I forget the name of the venue.
And
But
is it a band that you put together for your performance?
it is a band that comes together for these GEMA shows of
Mm.
Georgetown graduates. There's some great
Mm.
singers, amazing talents. I mean, it's amazing to me the people that have gone to Georgetown.
Yeah.
There's John Mulaney went to Georgetown.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Who was the other guy? Oh, God. Anyway,
Well, you have to tell us, yeah, we have to tell our listeners. When you went to Georgetown, you studied something that people may or may not expect. Can you tell us about that?
well, I was a sculpture major at Georgetown. I did metal
Oh.
sculpture was my concentration, but I was an art
Mm.
major. And in the 60s, the late 60s, not too many people went to Georgetown for art. And so I come from a family of creative people. My mother was the copy director of an advertising agency in Manhattan,
Wow.
and my stepfather, was the art director from that.
Mad
So,
Men
so
in real
yes, so
life.
yeah, exactly. Mad Men is hard for me to watch because, just the whole martini syndrome is
Yes.
kind of painful for me. But
Mm.
other than that, so I was always encouraged to be creative. And I went to Georgetown thinking I was going to be an English major, a journalism major. I wanted to be a writer.
Mm.
Um, I had gotten advanced placement English credit from high school, but they didn't recognize it when I got to Georgetown. So I had to wind up taking freshman English again, which was kind of deadening to me at the time. And, so and I had some alienation during freshman
Mm.
year in
Mm.
college. I wanted to transfer to Berkeley out in California actually at one point, and
Mm.
Georgetown seemed too preppy, too Hoya to me at the time. But most of the band from Loyola had moved to Georgetown together, so our band was more or less intact. So that
Yeah.
kept me going there, and then after the end of freshman year, they called me in. They said, "Well, we were mistaken. We should have given you English credit." I was like, "Oh, well,
Great.
thanks." So you don't have to take any more English credits. And then I had to make a decision as to where I was going to go with that.
Mm.
And I kind of decided I could be a writer no matter what I took. That's what I felt.
Mm.
And what appealed to me was the smallness of the art department.
Mm.
It was a very tight-knit group because people went to Georgetown well, they went for nursing, they went for government, and they went for law.
Mm.
Basically, that was the Georgetown model, I guess. And so, yeah, I picked art, and so I became, I went through the art courses there. There was a very inspirational painting and printing teacher named
Mm.
Clifford Kiefo, and he's still there. He's like emeritus at Georgetown
Wow.
now.
Whoa.
He was very young at the time. I mean, he was maybe 5 or 6 years older than most of
Mm.
us in the class, and he had a good knack for bringing out inspiration, for you to find inspiration. And the woman was named Joan Carroll. She was the sculpture teacher,
Mm.
and she was a character. She was kind of a combination of Ethel Merman and who was the Alice B. Toklas? What was that? Gertrude Stein, I think.
Gertrude Stein.
Yes.
She had that combination. So yeah, and not only
Great.
that, but the dean of the college was Royden B. Davis, and Royden was a sculptor as well. So I
Mm.
got to know him, in a somewhat intimate way, hanging out in the sculpture studio. In Georgetown in those days, you had to take each semester had to take either theology or philosophy.
Mm.
That was the Jesuit. It's a Jesuit school. And I said, "Do I really have to keep taking that?" And he's like, "Well, no." So I was able to drop those requirements, and from then on, my QPI, as they called it,
Mm.
went really well. So for what it's worth, I did really well in the art classes there, and I only basically had one opportunity to use my art degree. And okay, so one of my jokes is I do music to support my substitute teaching career. Um,
Yes,
because
tell us about
I've been
this.
I've been substitute teaching at a high school not too far from where I live,
Mm.
and basically for 27 years, basically in that school. So I've been there longer than all the teachers and
Yeah.
everybody. Kind of goodbye, Mr. Chips kind of thing is me there.
Could you tell
Anyway,
us where you are? Could you tell
oh
us
sure, I'm in Franklin, Tennessee, which
Franklin,
used to
Tennessee,
be a
outside of
destination.
Nashville, right?
Yes, we're a little bit south of Nashville. Anyway, so I'm not sure. What did I tell you that part about the substitute teaching? Anyway, um, the where was I going with that? Can you remind
Let's
me?
see. So your music supports your substitute teacher
Right. Before I said that, though, I was
need.
going somewhere
Yeah.
with that. Um, well, for what it's worth, it
For
probably
what
has
it's
to
worth.
do with, oh, okay, using my degree. Okay,
Mm,
so one
mm,
day, actually the first year I was subbing there,
mm-hmm.
it was career day, and various people of careers would come and visit the classrooms, and mine was the artist came to my classroom. And so after class, I said, "Hey, I've got a degree. What can I do?" And he said, "Well, I need someone who can weld and do metal sculpture." And I was like, "Well, I'm your guy." So for the rest of that year, I helped him construct this statue, which he had
Mm,
been commissioned to do, of two angels kind of intertwined. It was about 7 feet tall, and the wingspan
Mm.
of 10 feet. It was
mm,
so
Mm.
I constructed the armature and helped him finish it off and install it ultimately. And so that was really fun and it was good. But other than that, I mean, I have continued painting and
yes.
drawing and doing an artist kind of thing. I
Mm,
just haven't. Well, I've sold some paintings and I've had a few exhibits actually. I wrote a song
fantastic.
called R&RIP, the Rock and Rest in Peace, kind of a send up of uh, of my heroes and the departed heroes of rock and roll. And I started doing pieces around that, and gallery in DC and in Hollywood picked up on it.
Yeah.
We did. That was around. Well, that was about 10 years ago now that I did that.
And who were those heroes? Who were some of those heroes?
Oh well, it of
Mm.
course there's Elvis and there's Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix and
Mm,
Janis and well, Bo Diddley and
mm,
Otis Redding and Jan Berry and
of
yeah,
course.
no, I should
Mm.
pull out one of my catalogs here and hold it up for you. But yeah,
Absolutely.
and then I mean I painted about 40 of them, so
Yeah,
there's
amazing.
yeah, so yeah, but but yeah, I've always been, I, I guess to say I'm a Renaissance man is kind of a description of the way I approach things. You know, I love writing. Like I've written a few scripts. I'm still trying to get those out there.
Mm,
I've done whatever I could think of creatively.
yeah,
That was my drive in life.
that's a great way of putting it. Yeah. And between Georgetown and then the first two albums, there's a period there when you go to LA and you hook into that scene. Can you tell us? Can you tell our listeners about that and some of those
Oh,
stories?
sure. Well, Sageworth as a band was doing really well in
Mm,
Georgetown.
mm-hmm,
We played across the street from a club called the Cellar Door. And one night in December of 1970, Linda Ronstadt came into town to do a
mm-hmm,
week there. It was one of those mid-range clubs where artists would play 5 or 6 nights and
mm,
kind of be in residency for a week. So they came in, they had loaded in their equipment and they were looking for dinner. We were playing at the club, the bar and grill across the street called Apple Pie. They heard the music and they came in and they liked what we were doing. We got to meet Linda and her crew, which included a guy named Chris Darrow, who had had a career of his own in Kaleidoscope and Nitty Gritty Dirt Band.
mm,
So Chris wanted to take our band to California to produce us, but he wanted the publishing on all the songs, and that
right.
Uh-huh.
that sort of put an end to that. But I stayed in touch with him, and
Mm.
when Sageworth broke up, ultimately we moved out of D.C.
Mm,
Too scared to go to L.A. Too cynical about New York, having grown up there. Want to go there? We moved to Boston, thinking that there's a lot of schools, good place to, you know,
yeah.
do our music, and yeah, we got close to a deal a couple of times,
Mm,
and it
mm,
just didn't happen. And then, infighting begins in the band. It's your fault. No, it's your fault.
Mm.
right.
And I guess I carried a lot of the fault because it was mostly my songs that we were
Yeah.
playing. I was the lead
Right.
guitarist. So when the band broke up, I got in touch with Chris. I said,
Mm,
"Hey, the band broke up." He said, "Oh, that's too bad, but now you can come play with me." And I was like,
mm,
"Yeah, all right, I'm coming." So I bought out the van, the band van, and drove to California. If you've seen the movie or the series Daisy Jones and the Six,
Hmm.
it's a book and it's a series of very loosely based on Fleetwood Mac, but also based on my life because the band drives to California in a van, gets discovered at a hoot
Mm.
night at the Troubadour, records at Sound City, all of the things,
Yeah.
touchstones of my life. So, yeah, so Chris's invitation brought me to California. And when I went out there, my mother, well, before I left, my mother said, "So now that the band broke up, what are you going to do to get serious?" Like, well, Mom, I'm going to go to LA and I'm going to make a record. And she's like, "Oh, okay." Because I hadn't really been the lead singer in the band for a while
Mm.
because of
Mm.
Annie and the other singers that we had. So, I guess it was a bit of braggadocio that it was that brought me there. I was like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna do this. This is where I'm drawn to. And he says he likes me, this guy Chris Darrow, and he's doing okay. So we'll see. Anyway, so I went out there, drove out there in April of '74. Um, when I got to Claremont, Chris was just about to do a tour of the British Isles, and his label withdrew their tour support. UA
Right.
UK, the label that
Mm.
ultimately signed me, or was going anyway.
Mm.
So Chris turned to me and said, "You want to be my band?" And I said, "Sure, okay, let's go." So I was in LA for 2 weeks, and then I went to England for a month, and that was in April and May of '74. And during that time, I met the guy, Andrew Lauder, who would
Mm.
ultimately be at the Troubadour the night we did our Hoot Night. And even though I had written like 6 of the 7 songs that the band did, I
Mm.
only sang one of them.
Mm.
At the end of our thing, he offered me the deal instead of the band. And so that was a bit awkward for me because I had been basically sleeping on the couch of a couple of the other guys in the
Yeah.
band
Yeah.
in Claremont, California.
Which is a college town as well.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful little oasis out there in the Inland Valley.
Yeah.
And I lived there for a couple of years when I first moved
Mm.
thinking I was moving to LA, and it was 40 miles short,
Yeah. Yeah.
basically. But I had the drive to keep going into LA and hang out, and I hung out with the guy with Greg Lewis, who became my manager. He worked at
Mm.
UA, and whatever contacts I had through Chris, I would explore them out there.
Mm.
So yeah, that was how I got there. And after 1 year, nothing was really clicking. I came back to New York,
Mm.
my tail between my legs, and had, I back home, and it was like, yeah, I know, I'm here, but didn't know what was going to come next. And then I got a
Thank
call from
goodness you had your home to go back
Well,
to.
that's true. Yeah, I was very lucky. And, I had supportive parents. My
Mm.
mother always would send me a little bit. And you need people like that to make it in business, I think.
And to
Mm.
keep your confidence alive so that you can plow through, whatever
Yeah,
falls
exactly.
your
Yeah,
way.
exactly. To keep believing in that dream, And
Mm.
so I was there for a couple of weeks during the Christmas season at the end of '74.
Mhm.
And I got a call from Jackson Brown asking if I wanted to be a rhythm guitarist in his touring band that was
Yeah.
coming up for Late for the Sky. I had met Jackson in '72
Mhm.
when Sageworth did a week-long gig at the Bitter End in New York
Mm.
City,
Mm.
where the headliners were Sandy Denny and Richard Thompson from Fairport Convention, who I
Mhm.
love both.
Great.
And
Yeah.
Jackson was promoting his first album at that point. This is February of '72.
Mm.
And the owner of the club wanted to manage us, so he stuck us in for a 15-minute set twice a night for that week. And so we got, Variety did reviews of us, and it was nice. It was a nice little moment. But we got to know Jackson. We hung out
Mm.
with him, and so when I moved to there in '74, I was friends with David Lindley, who was playing guitar for him, and I would drive David around in my van. I would take him to rehearsal and sort of hang out and stuff. So I think he had a lot to do with me being asked to do that because when I moved to California, I had a couple of things. I would I knew Linda Ronstadt then, and we'd hang out with her. In fact, this beat up Ford Econoline van, I drove her to Madison Square Garden, and when she was opening for the Beach Boys, we were
Oh,
hanging out together that day. So
the
and she
stories
was,
that man could tell.
and she was, she said, "Well, you know, my guitar player isn't really working out, so if you come to California, you can
Mhm.
come try and play with me." It's like, oh, okay. And of course, that guitar player turned out to be Andrew Gold, and Andrew worked out fairly well
Yes.
shortly thereafter. So, yeah, and so I had sort of known Jackson a little bit, and I tried to, I was hanging out as much as I could. That was the only
Mm,
way you could find people and network in those days, And
mm,
but I think David Lindley had a lot to do with why he called me. He wanted
yeah.
me to play electric rhythm while Jackson played acoustic rhythm
Mm,
and sing a couple of harmonies. And as it evolved, I rehearsed with him for about 3 weeks.
mm,
He wanted to play more electric, and I got to play more acoustic, which was
Mm.
whatever. I didn't mind that, but he wanted me to sing more and more harmonies. And I
mhm,
had never been a harmony singer, much less a lead singer in those days.
mm,
I was very insecure about that. And it showed.
mm,
I really was just learning how to do all that stuff at that point and learning on the
mm,
job with
mm,
Jackson Brown on a big tour wasn't going to work out. So he let me go. I wound up working with an act at A&M Records. Jules Shear was the leader of that act, and it was a band called Southpaw, which ultimately they were funding and nurturing this band, and then they
mm,
passed on their own band ultimately. But it was during that time that I was able to realize if I'm going to do anything, it's probably going to be on my own terms.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
ultimately, that's how it worked out. So,
Mm,
disappointments, sure, I was disappointed by that. I expected to be on the road with
mm,
Jackson in those days.
mm,
So, but a year later is when I wound up getting my deal. So, you know,
That's
yeah.
yeah.
but I knew the guys I had met through Linda. I had met Don Henley and Glenn Fry, and
Mm,
so uh, I think it was Bernie Ledden was leaving the Eagles at that point, or at least that was the rumor. So I sent a letter to Glenn. I said, "Hey, I'm here now. I'm ready. Hold the spot open for me." And I met him at the Troubadour Bar one night,
yeah.
and Dan Fogelberg was there that night too.
Mm,
And Glenn was like, "Well, we're going to stick with it the way it is right now, but man, I know." Put his arm around my shoulders, like,
mm,
"Man, I know if you just stick with it, you're going to make it. Just
Oh gosh.
believe in yourself and persevere." And I took it to heart. I was not
mm,
that young, but I was young in the business and
mm,
very much respecting these people and for what they had already done and for the
yeah.
music that they made at the time. Seeing them in September of '74 at the Santa
Mm,
Monica Civic Center to me was like the best concert I had ever seen. And I saw the Beatles 3 times, so but of course
wow.
that was more a social event than than a musical event in
Yeah.
those days. It was like, yeah.
Yeah, did
Song,
you
what
actually
the
hear the
words?
Beatles at those concerts?
I saw them at the first time at Carnegie Hall. I saw
Wow.
them at Forest Hills that summer of '64, and then I saw them at Shea in '65.
Oh,
Amazing.
So
whoa.
yeah, I got to meet Ringo once on a plane when he was on Columbia and I was on Columbia. That was kind of fun. And one day I was pumping gas out
Mm,
at the 76 station at at Ventura and Beverly Glen, whatever that
mm,
turns out there.
Listen to this memory. My
Oh,
gosh, for
yeah.
detail.
amazing.
And so I'm pumping gas, and George Harrison pulls in his camel hair 280 SL on the other side of the pump, and it's like, oh, oh man, that's George Harrison. Oh, man. You know, and and at this point I had magnetic steel out and stuff,
Mm,
so it was like, I wonder if he knows who I am. I wonder
do
if
I
he's
do
like,
it?
it's one of those weird moments where ultimately, what do you say to a Beatle anyway? I was like, I gave him the high sign, and he
That's
smiled,
right.
nodded at
It's
me. I thought,
it's one big community, one
well,
big
you'd
community.
like to think so anyway. Yeah.
And that with that community, when do Emmylou Harris and Graham Parsons come into the picture for
Well, that
you?
was earlier on. That was back at
Yeah.
Georgetown. And to me, so I was a big Byrds fan in the
Mm.
60s when they were a psychedelic folk rock band. And so this was, 8 Miles High, I thought was a wonderful single. And
Amazing.
all of that was great. So when Sweetheart of the Rodeo came out, it was different. It was it
Yes.
was very traditional country music, and
Mm.
in 1968, the hippies and the rednecks, the country music fans,
No. Mm.
it was, yeah, we were on opposite sides of the field,
Yeah.
and so it was a very radical thing for a rock band to do to play basically straight country music without kind of a tongue-in-cheek, the way Ringo used to sing country songs for the Beatles. It was always kind of like a wink, and it wasn't. So it took a bit of adjustment to listen to Sweetheart of the Rodeo and go, okay, yeah,
Mm.
this is good stuff, yeah. And then to notice on the labels, who is G. Parsons?
Yeah.
Who is this guy? So, we whatever chance you would get to try to. And I was pretty all consumptive of the media of the day. I subscribed to the Mojo Navigator Rock and Roll News out of San Francisco. I mean, even in high school, for one Christmas when the Beatles were hitting, I said, "Can I get a subscription to Cashbox?" I had a subscription to Cashbox in high school, and so I was, very tuned into
Mm.
things that are happening, where you could find it. And of course, Rolling Stone came out in '67. Anyway, so yeah, I looked into it more and more, and so I became fairly obsessed with Graham Parsons in those days. And then Flying Burrito Brothers happened as out, Birds begat Flying Burrito Brothers,
Mm.
and then it was kind of wow, yeah, this is great because it's that traditional country feel, but the lyrics are a little strange
Mm.
for a country song. And so somehow they had made a hybrid of it, Chris
Hmm.
Pillman being the other guy in the band. So I
Hmm.
was tuned into Graham, and in the early '70s, he went off on his own because he wanted to hang out with Keith Richards rather than follow the Byrds and do that whole thing then. So one Emmy Lou was playing the same circuit as we were, so we were friends with her, and she was very folky.
Mm.
She, would have the long velvet dress and play. She was very like Judy Collins-ish at the time, and Joni Mitchell, I guess, too. But she was beautiful, and she was a wonderful singer, and so she was very appealing to go see and to watch. And so one night I was watching her at a club called Clyde's on M Street, and Chris Hillman came in and approached her about his friend Graham looking for a singing partner. And she didn't know who Graham was. And so I said, well,
Mm.
I'll play some records for you. And so I did that. And Graham came to town the next day. They got together and sang. I saw the light one night. I mean,
Oh
that
yeah.
night when he
Yeah.
came to town, but without having any rehearsal. They wanted to have a place where they could get together and sing. And I
Mm.
offered, my house, which was the band house. And so they came there the next day. He was wearing his nudie suit, that Manuel.
Embroidered.
Yeah, yeah, he was very charismatic. And at this point, I was pretty much like, oh yeah, Graham Parsons, this is so cool. And so they got together, and the, it was very much a band house. We painted the kitchen in tempera colors. It was a psychedelic kitchen, and during the winter, we take the door off of the oven so that we could bake potatoes, but also heat the house at the same time. And so this was where they came together, Graham and Emmy, and their voices were amazing right together, right
Mm.
from the start. And And I was sitting there just going, yeah, this is great stuff.
Oh,
And of course, you know, if it happened today, it would be fully documented on my phone.
Yeah,
Now
absolutely.
it just lives in my memory.
Memory.
can you remind us of that song?
Well, Hearts on Fire, yes.
Hearts on Fire.
Well, that
Yeah.
was okay. Just to finish the, yeah, I know I get a little long-winded with the story here, but
No, 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 go ahead.
Oh, please.
so then when they started working together, after talking to Graham, one day I decided to try and write a country song for real, and
Mm,
even at that, I couldn't quite get through it without tongue-in-cheek. Well, it's called Hearts on Fire. I'm going to put something about heartburn in there, and
Oh boy.
you know. And my friend Tom Guidera, who was the bass player in our band, said, you know, this is a pretty good song. Why don't you let's change the lyrics here, a couple of things. And so we did. Emmy Lou took it to Graham. Graham loved it,
mm,
and they recorded it for the Grievous Angel album. So and that was my basically my calling card, my breakthrough. Even though
yeah.
I had had a small label cover before that of a song of mine, but
Mm.
yeah, and so that was a thrill to me, and just to hear that and to hear basically who was my idol in the
Mm,
music business at that point, Graham Parsons,
mm,
singing my song. For that matter, that could have been the end of my career. I was happy. This, what could be better than this, you know? And so, yeah, that was 73, and then of course Graham died very shortly thereafter.
Really?
mm,
Oh
Oh.
yeah, that was the big tragedy because he had seemed to be getting on track. He had
mm.
supposedly, who knows, but he wanted to die like Hank Williams, and he basically did, as far as dying when he was 27.
Wow.
Mm.
You know, shortchanging a lot of us for
A
his
lot
death.
of icons,
Well, that
decided.
was yeah, it was a crazy time with all that, with as
Mhm.
the RNRIP reflects that
Mm,
Okay.
over that period of time when Morrison and well, Morrison died in 71, but Janis and Jimmy were both in 70.
Right around the
mm.
same age.
Yeah,
The
and
27
Brian
Club.
Jones from the Stones was
Yeah,
basically the first one,
Yeah.
79.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Mm.
yeah, and so for Graham to die and to be so close to Emmy Lou during those times, I mean, it was just awful for her.
Mm,
This
Mm.
was her, you know, basically the start of her real career.
Mm.
yeah.
So
Well, let's keep the embers uh, burning.
Well, I think we have some of that song, don't we, Donna? So shall
Yes,
we
we
give it
do.
a go?
all right, I'm going to take this opportunity to blow my.
Hearts on fire. My love for you brought only misery. Hearts on fire. Put out the flames and set this cold heart free. One short year, our love had burned until at last, I guess you learned the art of being untrue and then goodbye. What could I do except to cry and moan? Lord, what have I done?
Yeah, you know, Graham.
Wow.
You know, he's one of those artists that has affected so many other people.
Mm,
I think even you could credit him with the whole um, alternative, well, alt country
mm,
movement that has
mm,
Mm.
kind of grown up in the last 10 years or so.
mm.
A lot of I think if you talk to a lot of those people, why are they doing this type of music?
Yeah,
And they would say, well, you know, Graham Parsons had a lot to do with it. And
that's
even
right.
to the extent where his partner, Chris Hillman,
Mm,
who is still living and still making music,
Absolutely.
nice music, he, you know, he had the talent that Graham had, but he didn't have that charisma, that whatever that thing you can't really put your finger on that people
Yep.
have when they are that kind of a star. And who's to say what would have happened if he had lived, whether he would have conquered his demons or not. But his legacy has inspired many, many people. I mean, there are yearly Graham Parsons tributes shows, certainly here in Nashville
Yeah.
and around the country, I think. So, yeah, that was another wonderfully fortunate thing for me to have someone to whom I looked up to cover my song and to give me that start in the music business was great. So it was
Amazing.
funny. That was my calling card coming to LA, but when I got to LA, I was trying to do rock. I was trying to do, a little bit of country rock, but more, pop rock, I suppose you'd call it. Because the simpatico that I had with the guys in Fleetwood Mac, from Lindsay and
Yeah.
Stevie, it wasn't power pop. It wasn't, it was what it was. But I don't know. When people ask me what is your music, I don't, it's got a little folk, country, like
Mm.
rock and roll certainly, and yeah, it's just my
Yeah.
music, and hopefully somewhat original. That's the idea that we try to strive for.
Mm.
But yeah, so Magnet and Steel has been included in the canon of yacht rock. There's a
Yacht rock.
band out of
Yes.
Atlanta got in touch with me maybe 12, 13 years ago
Mm.
called the Yacht Rock Review, and I was like, "What? So you play on boats? What is it?" No, no.
Oh my gosh.
It started as a spoof. There's a guy called Hollywood Steve on YouTube. These little vignettes of yacht rock. Why the smooth sound of yacht rock? How did it get that way? And they do these very kind of Saturday Night Live takeoffs. How did you know? How did Michael McDonald get back in the Doobies after they? And the first episode is that where he's trying to write a song and he can't get it, and Skunk Baxter says, "You're out of the band if you don't come with a new song." So he gets together with Kenny Loggins, and they're walking down an alleyway, and Jim Messina is like a wino in the alley, and he's like, it's very very broad comedy, but.
Mm.
And then he says, "Well, what a fool believes. I don't know." And then some Michael.
Oh wow.
And then it's all how it happened. And I think there are like 8 or 9 episodes of that.
Mm.
They're pretty funny, but it was a spoof. But this band out of Atlanta there was a cover band that was doing songs of that era,
Yeah.
and they just took it on, and they started dressing in polyester, and they
Yes.
started really
The outfits, the
making a
hats,
thing out of it, and
mm.
they became huge, certainly in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Where we'd play in Piedmont Park. They'd get the original people like myself and Robbie Dupree and
Mm.
Peter Beckett from Player, and to join them. Elliot Lurie, Brandy, You're a Fine Girl. These are
Oh,
the,
yeah.
these are the seeds of yacht rock, apparently. And I was very fortunate that Magnet and Steel happened to be during that time, because the rest of my stuff isn't very yacht rocky, and it's you know
It caught
I
it.
think it's the smooth sound of it.
Mm.
And mine's a little edgier, I think. And so
I've,
It's
I've got
I
to
nice.
like
find
to
out.
say I do these shows with Ambrosia and
Yeah.
Firefall and Orleans, and
Wow.
I say I am the barnacle on the yacht of rock, and I'm enjoying the ride. So
As
thanks.
long as you're there, enjoy the ride. I must ask a friend of mine who does yacht rock. He has a couple bands, Matt, here in Australia. He does yacht rock. I've got to find out whether he does Magnet and Steel, and if he doesn't, he very
Yeah,
well could be doing it. So, Walter, tell us now what's life look like? What's music look like for you today?
Well, music for me is a label in England called Red Steel Music, who has been
Mm.
putting out my later albums. My current album is one called Pluck, Pluck exclamation point. It's on Red Steel Music, and my current single from that is called. Now I know we've talked about hot summer nights, but what about the hard summer days?
Hard
Aha!
summer days.
And there's a video for that you can find out in
Oh.
the ether somewhere. We put that out a few months ago. So technically, those are my current releases. Um, There was one before that called Fascination that this
Mm.
label in England put out, and they are preparing for the November Record Store Day
Mm.
a vinyl version of one of my earlier albums with them, which
Ah.
in America is called the Lost Album, and in England is called the Mad Dog Album.
Mm.
But it has Christine McVie, it has Lindsey Buckingham, it has Chris Darrow, it has Jackson Brown,
Amazing.
yes, and David Lindley on there with me.
Oh
So
my God.
it's a fun album, and it was it was kind of shortchanged. It we began it
Mm.
after my okay, so I did 4 albums for Columbia, and when
Mm.
they stopped promoting me because Stevie and Lindsay weren't on the records, then we broke that deal. I did my
Right.
5th album on Backstreet, which was Tom Petty's label,
Mm.
and then after that is the one we did the Lost album. We began the recording anyway. So I'm talking too much, but
And that'll be
Well,
on
this
vinyl.
one's,
it's
Amazing.
going to be out for Record Store Day, the Lost album,
this
and
one sounds
Right.
very collectible.
yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
record, I have to say, even though I am saying it. But
You
and
can
then
say
so yeah, I've been doing these gigs where I'm basically being a songwriter, singer, opening for Firefall and Atlanta Rhythm Section, playing me and my acoustic guitar, telling the stories that I've been telling today with you
Beautiful.
and others. I'm also playing in Palm Desert at
Mm.
Agua Caliente with
Really?
Ambrosia and Peter Beckett, a player, and
When is that?
Oh,
that is coming up on May 31st.
Oh,
wow.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And this week, as I said, I'm playing in Philly with the Georgetown All Stars, basically. And then the following week, I'm in D.C. on the 13th, doing an interview with my friend Chris Darrow. I mean,
Mm.
with my friend Chris Murray, who used to be in the
Yeah.
band with me, and he helped me with my painting exhibits.
Mm.
And so there's a thing called the Hub, which is anyway, it's a Georgetown thing that's going on there. That I'm going there to do that interview next weekend, and I'm playing outside of Atlanta, doing the songwriter singer thing in Roswell, Georgia. I'm going to be at the Chiller convention.
okay.
Was the Charles Rosenet, who
Mm.
had done the Rock Con back in 2010.
Ah, yeah.
He has something to do with that, and he's bringing me in. I'm going to be the musical guest. It's basically an autograph convention
Yeah.
these days. I'm not even sure who the other people are that are going to be there. I'm sorry
How
about
great,
that.
though.
But that's going to be the weekend of the 25th, 26th of April. So April's a busy month.
Ooh.
Yeah.
In May, my son is getting married for the first
Ooh.
time, which is
Lovely.
a great thing. He's also going to
Congratulations.
New York for that. Yeah,
Oh,
the Chiller thing is in New Jersey, in Parsippany, New Jersey.
right.
Chiller, of course. Mm.
Yeah.
And then there's something else on the calendar.
And can our listeners get these like, do you have a Facebook page that they can go
Right,
to?
Walter Lindsay Egan Facebook page, Landsay. That's how I spell it. And the official page from the label in England is just Walter Egan. But
Great.
also, so I mentioned earlier that my manager had made the deal for North America with Columbia and then the rest of the world territorially. Well, we are about to make a deal for those 4 albums, from those 4 of the famous albums that
Yeah.
we're talking about, for a re-release and a re-promotion to a new distribution deal.
How great.
There's a label in Sweden that wants it. There's a label called Hollywood Sunset Boulevard, which
Perfect.
so we haven't picked the deal yet. Demon Records in England also wanted to do it. So hopefully that's going to be a resurgence. And yeah, so I'm still playing and singing as
Brilliant.
much as possible, which is pretty much every day. So I feel strong and ready to go out and promote the old stuff and the new stuff, and you know, hopefully get the book out this year.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And about to become a grandfather for the second time in June. My granddaughter Iris is the love of my life.
Oh.
So yeah, I didn't think my kids were going to make me a grandparent. So yeah, and I'm also, after 20 years of marriage. My wife and I got divorced in 2004 and remained friends around our kids through the years. 2017, we moved back together. So we are a country song in reverse. We are we are living together, and
Oh,
so that's neat. And actually, today is Tammy's birthday.
oh,
Yeah, happy
happy
birthday.
Yes,
birthday.
I'd like to wish her a happy birthday.
Oh,
So
how
yeah,
inspirational for so many people to listen to all of this kind of
Mm,
cruise that you've been on, riding the
yeah.
waves, and not, getting towed under. You're just always
Well,
managing to stay true to your path.
well, and it's been a fabulous life in a lot of ways for me. I mean, just meeting you, you were such a you were, on those beach party movies. You were, yeah, you were, must watch TV and movies. Donna. And
Well, I
so
am so
getting to make
delighted
that,
that we had a chance to
I
do
know,
Magnet and
me too.
Steel.
It's like one of the great things that's happened to me is that we did that recording together, and hopefully people will hear it and
They will right
like
now,
it. And
actually.
yeah, I
And
think they'll pick up on it, and who knows, we might be on the new version of Hullabaloo or Shindig and
ah, wouldn't that
singing
be
it
something?
together.
through YouTube,
Yeah, or
the
maybe we should
virtual
make a video
experience.
of it, do it like it, a la that,
Wow,
With
wow,
AI these days, we could probably bring back the Shindogs or somebody.
that would be fabulous.
It would be great.
Well, why don't
Oh,
we?
Walter, thank
Yeah,
you so much for this time together.
Well, thank
thank you
you.
very much.
I really,
And really and truly, I think that so many people will resonate with your life and not just your music, but I am so happy to focus on music
yeah.
through these turbulent times.
Oh, I
And
know.
music is going to save our lives
It
once again.
is. It's exactly right. It's what I've done. It's like otherwise we're going to go crazy. I
Well,
mean,
many, many blessings to you and many lots of love and kisses to you,
mm,
Adam, darling,
thank
and
you,
lots of
Adam.
aloha to
Thank you for
both of
having me.
you.
Thank you, Walter. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk. And why
Mwah.
don't we
Long
go
distance
to,
kisses and hugs.
let's go to Magnet and Steel, a new collaboration.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Now I told you so you ought to know. Take some time for a feeling to grow. You're so close now, I can't let you go. And I can't let go. With you, I'm not shy to show the way I feel. With you, I might try my secrets to reveal. For you are a magnet, and I am steel.
I can't hope that I'll hold you for long, 'cause I'm a woman who's lost in my song. But the love that I feel is so strong, and it can't be wrong.
With you, I'm not shy to show the way I feel. With you, I might try my secrets to reveal. For you are a magnet, and I am steel. For you are a magnet, and I am steel. For you are a magnet, and I am steel. For you are a magnet, and I am steel. So cool.
How great was that?
How legendary for me to be able to sing that with you after
Oh, darling, thank you. It's
a
a
legendary.
great pleasure.
Oh, it's so cool. Thank you for doing that.
Bon voyage on the
Okay.
rest of this journey of creating love and
Yeah.
music and joy
Well, come
and
to the casino
balance.
if you're close to Agua Caliente there. It'll
Ah,
be cool.
that would be so cool.
Yeah, Ambrosia is such a good band, and to have them as my backup band, and that is really, really
That's
good.
fantastic.
So yeah, who am I to complain? Yeah.
Enjoy,
Yeah.
enjoy,
Well, thank you,
both of you.
and thank you so
Great.
much.
Thanks again, Walter. We'll let you know when everything's ready to go.
Excellent. Well, have a good rest of the day.
You as well, and safe journey tomorrow and on all your travels.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Adam.
Say hi
Pleasure.
to
Thank
Johnny if you speak
I
with
will
him as
do that, of
well.
course. I'll be seeing him tomorrow.
Oh, and is he okay with in Malibu?
Yeah, they've survived pretty well. I'm not sure if you know his new situation.
No.
Well, we were speaking about Dick Dale earlier. Well, on the same weekend that Dick Dale died, his longtime wife died, Joan.
Oh.
She had been battling. Anyway, we don't need to go into that. But anyway, so John was, a new man after that. He was like, well, and then his son, who's a great musician in his own right, Johnny, put him together technically with Jane Seymour. And
Oh.
so John and Jane have been together almost 2 years now.
Right.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, so it's been kind of a funny,
Oh,
funny postscript to
Yeah.
John's life. So yeah,
that is beautiful.
and Jane is such a sweetheart. She's really nice, and so she's actually sat in with the Malibus a couple of times,
Oh,
sang hot summer nights with us a little bit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I don't think Jane is going to be with. He's been over in Ireland with her, and he's flying in tomorrow for this show, which is on Friday. But I guess Jane might be there, but I don't think she will be. But yeah, so John will be there, and I will give him your love. And
Please
He
do.
sends it back to you.
Wow. That's beautiful. Oh, what a lovely ending to this story.
Yeah,
Just
it's
to have
really
that
neat.
second chance in life.
Yeah, he really. They both love each other very well.
No, that's
So
beautiful.
it's nice. He, of course, to say that he went through a lot, yeah, but of course Joan went through even worse. But yeah, he did support her and do everything through all those years. And so, it's nice for him to have this kind of happy ending, I think.
It certainly is. Well, it's still continuing.
Yeah.
You
Anyway,
become
I will give him
ageless
your
at some
regards.
point. I promise you.
Yes. Yes, let's all be happy.
Yes,